Barbara, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to interview you again. I had the opportunity about, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, and so excited about the work you're doing and how you're helping so many people throughout America and the world learn how to live healthier. I believe you have a special gift of teaching, and so thank you so much for joining me.
That's great, Sorin. I'm happy to be here.
Well, excited. So I'd love to just start off by asking you just on some common ailments. These are questions that people really have. So let's start with one: dealing with anxiety and stress. What are some of the best things people can do to deal? Because we live in a very high stress world today. So what are some of the best things people?
We do live in a high stress world, but I'm also, maybe it's because I'm the daughter of an inventor, but I always want to know why. So I look back and say, when did this start? What triggered this? And even though something may have triggered it, that's gone. And you can come back and readjust to that. It also shows, and I'm sure you're aware of this, Sorin, that not only our bodies get into habits, but our brain firing gets into a habit. So it's almost a little bit like, it's okay. You don't have to be anxious. But a lot of people, their thoughts spiral out of control. Proverbs 23:7 says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So even though you might be feeling stressful, you can analyze it and say, do you know, it's okay. And when you breathe very deeply through your nose with your abdominal muscles, long, slow and deep, I call it God's LSD, long, slow, deep, it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system is your calming, peaceful nervous system. So just using breath can make a huge difference. But breathing high through the mouth, that actually stimulates your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight and flight. So just changing breath. But again, it's a decision in the brain. It's this front part of the brain. And this front part of the brain, I believe God put there as a board of sensors, a board of critiques to our emotions, because it's often from our emotions come the anxiety. And it is true when you're dehydrated, when you haven't had enough sleep, hormones are out of balance, not eating well, all of that can just tip the scale to increase anxiety.
That's interesting. I'm an anesthesiologist, and when you have a patient on a ventilator during surgery, you give them those deep breaths. It helps close all the atelectasis. And my wife's a singer, and they talk about singing correctly using the diaphragm, because you're right, most of the time we breathe up here, and so you close some of those alveoli, and so you don't get the full oxygenation and the CO2 exchange. It's really about the CO2 exchange.
It is the CO2 exchange, and oxygen soothes the nerves. And every cell in the body requires oxygen. In fact, when a cell has oxygen, it'll give you 18 times more energy. And looking at anxiety, we want that energy to calm. We want that energy to be able to soothe the nerves.
Are there any supplements? Obviously, you mentioned exercise, hormones. Are there any particular supplements that you think help?
There's one that's become very popular. It's called St. John's wort. So again, I want to know why. Why does this have an effect? And I like to target it specific. And St. John's wort is a nerve nourisher. So it nourishes those nerves. It's a mild tranquilizer. It's a mild sedative. It's obviously not going to do what the drugs do, but it plays a role. Sometimes people find even a cup of hot chamomile tea will do it. The hot tea and chamomile is a very mild tranquilizer and sedative. But the St. John's wort is a little stronger.
That's great. Just let me run through some of these quickly, but eczema and psoriasis. You have any thoughts? That seems to be a very hot topic.
It is a hot topic, and I have discovered through the many people that I have helped and seen over the last 40 years that it's definitely an allergy. Now, you can have someone who's been eating the common allergen foods all their life with no problem, but then a stressful situation will happen. Maybe they'll have exposure to chemicals and it'll arise. And then the foods that they could eat without problem, now they cannot. So I say to people, these 5 common allergens, they are some of the most common foods, and that is dairy, wheat, oats, peanuts, and refined sugar. Dairy, it is estimated in Australia 60% of Australians are intolerant to dairy. If that was raw, organic milk, it'd probably bring it down to 30%. That is acknowledged. People say, what milk do you drink? I say, I'm weaned, I eat food. Milk is really for babies. Wheat was hybridized in the 1950s, and it created a very complex protein or gluten structure, and so the body often reacts to that, some majorly, some minorly. Oats are very high in a plant chemical called lectins, and lectins can increase inflammation in the body. Peanuts are commonly contaminated with mold, which adds to the allergy, adds to the inflammation. And refined sugar is like pouring kerosene on a fire. So we have found that when a person stops those allergen foods, it takes at least 2 months. So I've had some people say, I tried it, it didn't work. I said, how long did you stop it for? 2 weeks? You can have a slice of bread, it'll be out of your body in 24 hours, but the effect can remain. So it's actually getting that effect out of the body. And if a lady is breastfeeding her baby and her baby has eczema, then the lady stops those foods. I had one lady, at 1 month, she contacted me, she said, Barbara, the eczema is still bad. I said, you got 1 more month, 1 more month.
So give it time, because we all want instant everything.
Instant. And, at 2 months, she sent me a photograph of her baby eczema-free.
Wonderful. I used to, we were pretty devout vegans for a long time. And the kids were all, when they were little, raised pretty strict vegan. And so I used to do a lot of talks on milk. And the problem with milk is they give hormones to the cows that make them produce 7-8 times as much milk as they would. So then they get mastitis, and they have infections and pus, and then they have to bleach the milk and give antibiotics to kill that to make it safe and pasteurize it. And when you pasteurize it, you oxidize the cholesterol. So I totally understand that.
And you kill all the vitamin C. And I was talking to a guy in Ireland, and he was a dairy farmer in the 60s. He said, I cannot believe the amount of antibiotics we used to give the cows. I said, why? He said their udders were so heavy that their hooves would split. And when the hooves split, of course, then you get infections. So they just pump them full of antibiotics. That was in the 60s.
Wow. So I could only imagine what it is today. Let me ask you about inflammation and pain.
Well, I always investigate what is the pain, what is the source of the pain. Mm-hmm. So we've been raised as children, if there's a problem, go to the doctor, get a tablet, and it stops the symptoms. But as Paul Brand says in his book, The Gift of Pain, he says it has a purpose. It's there to tell you something. And it's important to notice, where does the pain come from, why it is there, and then address that. Now, yes, I was in a crash 2 nights ago, and yes, I've got a bit of a dark eye there. And so it can be a little painful at times, and you know what I think? No wonder I crashed. I'll get over it, so there's no need for a painkiller. I guess the biggest problem is when there's a pain and a person doesn't know. And that's why it's important to investigate. When did the pain begin? What was the start of the pain? And it's very sad. I've had a couple of ladies tell me this. They had back surgery, a nerve was cut, and they're now in constant nerve pain. That is very, very difficult to deal with because it's from that surgery. But in the next breath, I've had people that have had surgery and, it's the best thing they ever did. But I love Dr. Kellogg. The report of Dr. Kellogg is he was an excellent surgeon, but he rarely did surgery. So I like to explore every avenue before surgery, but I do understand that sometimes it's necessary. But we have an old saying, nip it in the bud, and stitch in time saves 9. And what Paul Brand says, if you don't listen to the first whisper, the body will start screaming. And when it starts screaming, you're doing damage. And often that's irreparable damage. And I find that an injury, if someone has pain, it's not actually the injury. It's that they kept using that part of the body that was injured instead of resting.
Yeah.
And so the injury has come, there was an initial injury, but if it was given the right conditions, rest, ice, nourishment, and it could have healed. It's now 40 years later, they wouldn't have a problem there. And of course, you can't change that.
Right.
But so I always look at the case. Sometimes, obviously if someone's carrying a couple of hundred pound excess weight, their knees are going to hurt. Knees aren't made to hold that. I was talking to an orthopaedic surgeon one day. He said, I just did a total knee replacement on a lady. He said, she's 200 pound. I don't know how they'll ever heal.
It's true.
It's interesting.
And I'd say with that, sometimes there's a mechanical problem. And so sometimes you need surgery to fix the mechanical issue, but also weight. Excess weight is a mechanical problem. You're overstraining the joints. So that would be treating the root of it. And we in Western medicine are very good at treating acute things like a broken bone, but we treat a lot of symptoms with the drugs, but we oftentimes don't treat the cause.
Yes, and analysing the cause. If you don't find the cause, you won't have a cure. But in answer to your question too, medicine does have some strong painkillers. The problem is, of course, they're addictive. The problem is too that they're not addressing the cause. So the person can often keep needing them. But there may be a time when there'll be a need for a painkiller. And cayenne pepper is an analgesic.
And that's on my list of things to ask you. So you love cayenne pepper. I see it's on your website, barbaroneal.com. I saw they sell it there. Why do you love cayenne? Let's just skip to that one.
Well, Leviticus 17:11 says the life of the flesh is in the blood, and cayenne pepper is a herb that will move blood quicker than any other herb. In fact, it is said that if you put cayenne pepper with any other herb, it'll increase that herb's intensity, which is quite amazing. But, there's two doctors that comment on cayenne pepper in the book Back to Eden. One said it's impossible to abuse. The other says you will never cause a lesion. And the author of the book, he devotes half a page to every herb, 10 pages to cayenne pepper.
Wow.
And the experience that I've had with it, I agree with him. It's a remarkable herb, but analgesic. I was in Bermuda. This was about 5 years ago now. I was staying with a accountant, and her husband was a construction worker, and she was the one interested in health, and I was doing meetings. And one evening, he was a very shy guy, built like a ox, as they say. Mm-hmm. He came up and he said, I've got a story for you. He said, I hurt my back. I was in terrible pain one night. And he said, I was pacing the floor. He said, and God said, take a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. He said it took him back a bit. It was an impression in his mind, but he had nothing to lose, so he took it. He said within 5 minutes, the pain had reduced by 80%.
Wow.
Sorry, not 80%, 50%. He was amazed. He said 15 minutes later, I took another teaspoon. Now that's a lot. He said now the pain had reduced by 80%.
Wow.
He said I was able to go to bed. He said I rang up my brother, who's a naturopath, the next day in America, and I said, I'm just telling you something strange that happened to me last night. Because he's a Christian man, he believes in God. He said, God told me to take cayenne pepper and my pain went away. And his brother laughed. He said, yes, it's an analgesic.
Wow.
So isn't that incredible? And my understanding is in America you can buy cool cayenne. That's the name of the supplement, cool cayenne. And it actually eases the passage, especially when it comes out.
Oh boy.
Because it certainly can give a tingle. So in my experience, I have found that cayenne pepper can actually be quite a powerful painkiller. Obviously not a sprinkle, but as this man did, he had a teaspoon, then 15 minutes later another teaspoon. But what I have experienced, if you mash aloe vera gel and mix it with the cayenne, it's an easier passage through the gut.
Okay. So that's how you recommend taking it as a powder. Now, it just scares me, the idea of taking a teaspoon
Oh
would
yeah,
probably
well,
make
just
me,
take a capsule.
yeah.
So easy to buy capsules.
I think that's an easier way to go.
Yes, we have to, and this is an important part, Soren, and I'm sure you are aware of this. The treatment has to be adjusted to a way that the person will do it.
That's right. Because if they don't do it, if you make something so difficult.
This strong construction worker, he did it. But that's tough going, taking a teaspoon.
I love it. What about probably one of the biggest problems in America, and I've heard you talk about this, and I think it's around the world, is Alzheimer's and dementia as people get older. That's a big fear for many people. So do you have any recommendations for avoiding it? And even things that you should really do when you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, so you avoid it later on.
What we do in our 20s is revealed in our 40s. What we do in our 40s is revealed in our 60s. The day comes. And Alzheimer's doesn't happen overnight. It's many years in the making. So it is damage to the nerve cells. Then one would question, well, what damages the nerve cells? Environmental poisons do. Definitely neurotoxins, things that have a neurotoxic effect. Mercury certainly does, and that is found today in fish. There's hardly a fish without mercury. The flu vaccine has it, but also the mercury amalgam fillings. I don't know how they ever got away with putting this neurotoxin in people's mouths, but that's another story.
Do you recommend testing? I know they can test hair.
Yeah, you can have hair analysis tests, and there are ways to get mercury out of the system. Cilantro and chlorella are both metal chelators. That is true, but the myelin sheath, that is what gets damaged from mercury, which is that fatty sheath around the arm of the nerve cell, it's basically cholesterol. So if someone's has low cholesterol levels, are on a fat-free diet with a mouthful of mercury, having flu injections every year and eating fish every day, that's a recipe for disaster. One person will get Alzheimer's, another dementia, another Parkinson's, another Huntington's chorea. Because of us, we are what we are because of, yes, our genetics, but science is saying today only 5%. We can't blame that. Genetics loads the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. Also, our experience in utero, our birth, what we were fed, given as children, that's what we are. We are a combination of all that. And that's why I believe God meant each one of us to be our own doctors. So it's actually tracing the history when someone has Alzheimer's. But to prevent it, please keep well hydrated. The brain's a hydroelectric system. And we had a lady come with dementia. She came with her daughter. And within 48 hours, there was no sign of dementia. Wow. She was dehydrated and constipated. Whew. Now, that was easy fixed. It's not always easy fixed. Again, it depends on the cause. And as I have found in many situations, and I'm sure you have found too, Sorin, there's not one thing.
That's right.
Now, yes, I got a black eye. That's because I had a crash. That's easy. There's one cause.
Right.
And that'll go. I won't have a black eye in a week. But what I have found in many cases of people's illnesses is not one thing. It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. And that's what I love about the way that God gave us the laws of health. And that's where you can reconnect all those little threads that have been broken. Start drinking more water. Start going to bed earlier. And I'll be talking about dementia tonight. Late nights, that's a huge contributing factor to Alzheimer's.
I think there's a link, and that gets into sleep, but I think there's a link with people that reduced... Well, I read the book Why We Sleep, Matthew Walker. So great book, but there's a huge link between sleep and cognitive
Say
decline.
no more, you would see it all. That's right. And two very famous people, Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, who boasted on 5 hours sleep a day. If they'd known what that lack of sleep was doing to them, I think they would have gone to bed earlier.
A quick one, cough remedies. That seems to be another topic people are interested in.
Yeah. Well, I say to people, do you know if you get a cold, you're going to cough for 2 weeks? And there's nothing that's going to stop that, because often all through our life, especially when people are mouth breathing, that brings in dirty air. The air hasn't been purified, it hasn't been filtered, and so lungs get built up, and there's only one way to get rid of the waste, and that's a cough. And so unfortunately I won't give anybody something to stop their cough, because if the body's coughing, there's a reason for it. And you look at smokers, they're always coughing. Yeah, they're going to cough. And even when they stop smoking, they'll cough for a couple of years, because little by little the body lets it go. But there's an excellent remedy if someone can't sleep because they're coughing, and that is chopping up onion, putting it on the bottom of the feet. You could slip it into socks even, then put a plastic bag round so your sheets don't smell like onion. Right. And that's very effective at stopping night coughing. And the reason for that is, I know everyone, if they chop up an onion, they start crying. So there's properties in the onions that directly affect the respiratory, the mucous membranes. And the biggest pores in the whole of our body are on the soles of our feet. So when you chop up that onion and put it on your feet, you see that it takes it in, it goes to the blood. And Psalm 104 verse 14, where the Bible says, God made herbs for the service of man. So these herbs are serving you. Where do you need me? Oh, you need me in the lungs. I'll go straight there.
And I've heard of that for fever. If a child has a fever, sometimes you put, I think it's onions. My grandmother was born in 1910, and she went to nursing school at Cologne in Switzerland, I think, and then also did physical therapy. And so she had all kinds of these remedies. That was the remedy in the 30s when she went to school.
Do you know she would have, and it's so sad that's been lost. And 10 years ago, I met an 80-year-old lady who'd been trained in Sydney at the Seventh-day Adventist Hospital there, and she was trained in hydrotherapy.
Wow.
And I've got Abbott's Hydrotherapy for Nurses. It's their textbook.
Okay, so you have that. And that's on my list here, so we may as well jump into that. So the hot, cold, that seems to be the hottest thing. Seems like every billionaire has one of these $100,000 cold plunge machine. So that seems to be a real trend on the internet now with a lot of gurus. What are your opinions on the hot cold, and what's the best way to do it, and what can it help with?
I think it's a good idea to ease into it. We're warm-blooded creatures, so our body reacts to the cold. And it's that reaction that the hydrotherapist uses, because the reaction causes a stimulating effect all through the body of the blood. And the blood, of course, feeds the nerves. So I suggest people, yes, have your hot shower, have a quick cold. And I agree with you, Sorin, your cold here is very cold. So I say to people, warn the neighbours that screams will come out of your shower.
Yes.
And the reason why we react like that is because we're warm-blooded creatures. So when cold water touches the skin, there is a reaction. Right. And that reaction moves blood. So a young man said to me one day, he said, I found something better to get you going in the morning than coffee. So I was all ears. I said, I'm all ears, James. He said, it's finishing my hot shower with cold.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And how long do you recommend? I know Andrew Huberman talks about 12 minutes per week total. So
okay, well, I think the most important thing is how much at a time. I've got a friend who's only very slight like me, and she tried the 3 minutes and she could not warm up for 24 hours.
Wow.
Now, I think that she could do that if she trained herself into it. So start with what you can handle. Maybe it's 10, 20 seconds, maybe it's 30 seconds, and every day stretch it a little bit more. And one thing that Dr. Paul Brand's book told me, the gift of pain is to listen. So I say to people, listen to your body. If the body says enough, stop. And one lady said, Barbara, my body says don't have a cold shower after the hot.
That's what my wife would say.
And I say, yes, but how do you feel after the cold shower?
You feel fantastic.
You feel like, I know maybe a month ago I was in Maryland and I found a lake. And I dipped in there every morning after my morning walk. And one morning there was ice on the ground, and the little jetty, the steel, handles where you went down the steps, that was the hardest part. They were frozen.
Wow.
And I dunked into that water, and I probably was in there 10, maybe 15 seconds. That's enough.
Wow.
But when I'm walking back, I've got my dry clothes on, my nice warm woolies. I said to Jacqueline, I feel like I've just had an injection of power.
I think so too. When you wake up early, exercise, take a nice warm shower, and finish it with cold. Sometimes my kids jump into the lake over here all season, all winter long, and it's energizing, and they love it.
It is energizing, but that's why I say to people, of course you're not going to want to do it. But I've been doing this for 15 years now. No matter where I am, I'm looking for a lake, and I looked at your lake, but it's very low at the moment, and it doesn't look easy to get into. If there was a jetty and I could just go in, I would have been in your lake every morning, but it's dropped. Did you say 10 foot?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, but they drop it quite a bit.
Yeah, because I have experienced it, that it's such a powerful thing.
I love it. But here, because the water comes from wells, so it's very cold, so it's always refreshing.
It is.
In Idaho because the water's very cold. Hair growth. I saw that. Any thoughts on that one, that subject?
Yes, hair growth can certainly continue. One must have a look at what's causing the loss. And I know with a lot of Black American ladies who are perming their hair to straighten it, one friend of mine, she's in her 70s now, she has no hair. And she knows it's because for, I think, 40 years she permed it. So those perming solutions are chemicals and they kill the follicles. I also know that a lot of Black American ladies braid their hair, and the weight can pull it out. I think they're fairly obvious ones. There is a genetic tie.
That men and women, unfortunately, sometimes get.
And so there's a little bit of genes, but remember, genetics loads the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. Nutrition is important, and minerals. Minerals are very important. Minerals make up our bones. Our bones are hard keratin, and our skin is called soft keratin. And our hair is actually called hard keratin too. And it's nourished by inside. When our hair leaves our head, it is basically dead. But it's connected to the hair follicle.
So keratin, any supplements, or I've heard rosemary oil.
Rosemary is a specific for the scalp, a specific for the brain. So what I suggest is you can do coconut oil, maybe half a cup of coconut oil with 6 drops of rosemary essential oil, or some people will do half coconut, half castor oil, and massage it into the scalp and let it stay there all day, and that soaks in and nourishes the scalp, and one might do that once a week.
Very interesting.
One more point.
Okay.
There's a chemical that is in the majority of shampoos that causes them to foam. It's called sodium lauryl sulfate. Sodium lauryl sulfate is a toxic poison. They use it to make the foam, but it kills hair follicles. So you might need your magnifying glass because the small print has probably the most important information.
Yes, and I know my wife buys some special herbal shampoo. Hopefully it's good. I'll look for that in there. Supplements. Let me just go through some of these. Let me jump through some ones rapid fire here. Caffeine.
Yeah, it shouldn't go into the body.
Why not?
Because caffeine, it disrupts the neurotransmitters in the brain. When caffeine goes into the body, it creates a crisis response. And that's actually why so many people love it. They say, I love my coffee, gets my brain going, gets me up and moving. I said, yeah, that's because it's just created a crisis response. And one writer said it like this: to take coffee to give energy is like taking out a loan to pay off a loan. Eventually there's a deficit. Eventually there's nothing left. And what I have found in my many years of helping people, especially women, is women age very, very quickly. Their skin seems to line very, very quickly.
That's like the hottest topic, and that's the biggest industry, the cosmetics and anti-aging.
Yeah, they'll probably get a bit more criticism over this one. But I'm just telling you the truth because that's what's important to me, is to tell the truth. And I have to tell you too, I won't be intimidated because I'm answering to a higher power for what I say, and that is to God. So I'm sorry that caffeine is not good. We had a pathologist do our program. He said, we did studies on caffeine and we discovered that we need 5 glasses of water to make up for the dehydrating agents in 1 cup of coffee. Yeah.
It's a diuretic. You've seen the picture of the spider that's on caffeine.
Doesn't build a very nice web.
Matthew Walker, in his book on sleep, he hates caffeine.
Oh yeah, his is very interesting. I often say to people, Matthew Walker was not happy with his conclusions. He was hoping a bit of coffee and 5 hours would be great, but it is not.
It's not, and that's very true. Niacin. Any thoughts on that? I think that's vitamin B3.
Yes, it is vitamin B3, and it's very important. And a lot of research is showing that people with Alzheimer's are drastically lacking B vitamins. So your B vitamins are found in raw nuts and seeds. A lot of people don't eat raw nuts and seeds.
What if they're baked or whatever?
Baking.
Or I don't know what the term is, but
I know what you mean. Roasted.
Roasted, that's the term.
If you roast it, you don't really harm the bees, but you do certainly harm the oils. Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes we'll do a roasted almond and blend it and make a satay sauce. So it's not the odd day you might have a dish with a few roasted nuts, as long as most of the nuts that you eat.
So a raw.
Yeah.
And what's your favorite nuts?
Oh, that's a very difficult question.
Not peanuts.
No, they're not. I do like cashews. Macadamia are amazing. I love a good walnut. Unfortunately, you don't often find a good walnut because they're very high in omega-3 and omega-6. So if they're broken, the light, air and oxygen are attracted into the empty spots on the molecular structure, and they go rancid very easily. A good walnut is sweet, but most people think walnuts have a bitter after flavour. That bitter after flavour is an indication that they're rancid.
I love it. So, and I agree with you on the B vitamins. I met a doctor. He thinks, and it's true, if you look at B12 in a biochemistry book, it seems to sneak its way in all kinds of different chemical reactions in our body.
That's true.
And I believe, maybe, I'm sure you know more about this than I do, but the old way you would get it, you would pull a carrot out of the ground, shake it off, maybe rinse it and eat it, and that would have B vitamins. But today they radiate all the food.
They do. Oh, my grandchildren, they don't even wash it.
Out of the ground. I agree. Just shake it off.
They give it a shake.
That's wonderful.
And you're right, that B12 is an airborne bacteria. So you will find B12 on homegrown fruits and vegetables and plants. You'll find it in water tanks. But the main issue with B12 is the gut, because the B12 can only be absorbed if it has the intrinsic factor. And the intrinsic factor is released from the parietal glands, which is where hydrochloric acid and pepsinogen are released. So if a person has low hydrochloric acid, they usually have low intrinsic factor. And also, B12 is bound up with an R protein in food, and hydrochloric acid breaks the R protein from the B12. So if you've got low hydrochloric acid, you're not going to break the connection of R protein and B12.
It's very interesting.
So that's probably the first problem. Mm-hmm. But if you've got low hydrochloric acid, you've usually got low intrinsic factor. And if everyone's working well, B12 and intrinsic factor, they float together all through the small intestine, and it's in the ileum, the last part of the small intestine, where intrinsic factor and B12 connect, and then they're absorbed into the system. And then they go into the enterohepatic circulation, which is a circulatory system between the liver, and they can stay in that circulatory system until they're needed. And I was reading one study on B12, and they showed that a person can have no B12 in their diet for 30 years before they show a deficiency. You see, it's all about the gut.
That's very fascinating. I know some people can't absorb it, and you just kind of little light bulb went off when you said
Yeah.
that, because some people get the IM
They do.
intramuscular shots of it because they can't absorb it, but that may be a hydrochloric
do.
acid and intrinsic
Now,
factor.
if someone's been listening to that and they've said, what was all that? I've got some good news.
Okay.
I have recently published my new book called Sustain Me, and I've had a chapter in there on B12.
I love it. Okay, a few more. Now we're on the supplements. Curcumin.
Curcumin, I think it's one of the most potent anti-inflammatory that we have in the plant kingdom, and I think it certainly can play a role. I know when I tore my supraspinatus tendon totally with a 1 centimetre retraction,
Ouch.
I had a lot of pain, and I was taking 8,000 milligrams a day. So that's a very high dose of curcumin, and applying comfrey poultices. Do you know I totally healed my torn supraspinatus with a 1 centimetre retraction. In fact, the orthopaedic surgeon, when I had an MRI, because I thought, I don't know what's going on.
So you did not have surgery?
No.
And it healed?
He said, that will not heal.
Yeah, that's the common knowledge.
And because I'm not in health insurance, because I never get sick, I put all my attention into prevention. They contacted me 10 months later, and they said, oh, we've got a spot. I said, oh, it's healed. How did I know it's healed? It worked.
Interesting. So you're a fan of curcumin. Coenzyme Q, ubiquinol.
Coenzyme Q10 is naturally occurring in the liver, but what blocks that is all your cholesterol-lowering medication. So if someone's on cholesterol-lowering medication, do I suggest they take coenzyme Q10? No, I suggest they stop the cholesterol-lowering medication.
And that's a whole nother topic, but
Yep.
but I'm with you, because a lot of the cholesterol, and you've got a whole talk on how that affects brain function and
It's true.
and Alzheimer's, and can shut down the liver. So there's a lot of side effects. If you read the side effects list.
In fact, it's scary, and I'll be mentioning that tonight when I talk on Alzheimer's.
Yes. So NAC, N-acetylcysteine.
I think it can hold a place, but myself, I don't usually use supplements. And what I prefer to do is I use herbs, and they're specific, I guess, for specific functions in the body. I really am cautious that a person not stop seeing the doctor and take their drug and see the naturopath and take the herbal pill. I prefer to look at the body and start giving the body the right conditions, because it will heal itself. I'm not against supplements. I think that in some cases they certainly may play a role.
That makes sense. You're giving me kind of a general answer there, but cal, magnesium, zinc, and then I'm open if you've got natural ways of getting these, or specific herbs that help with that.
Zinc, I do advise people take zinc supplements, particularly men, if they have prostate problems, because I know zinc inhibits the conversion into the inflammatory type of testosterone. I also was reading a paper, studies done on people that have had the COVID vaccine, and zinc can inhibit the mRNA from reproducing the spike protein. So, yeah, that person may be on zinc for the rest of their life. Is there a natural source of zinc? There is, pumpkin seeds. So maybe they could take a quarter of a cup of pumpkin seeds every meal. But zinc, in a capsule form or tablet form, that certainly comes in high amounts. So there are some certain places where I think a zinc supplement can play a role.
And it sounds like from your talks, you're a fan of magnesium, and there's a triple magnesium.
I am, and I have found that magnesium citrate is the most absorbable form. And if someone has GERDs or reflux or heartburn, that muscle, that cardiac sphincter being a muscle, when it's relaxed, it's closed. And what magnesium can do is relax it, because magnesium is the ultimate muscle relaxant.
Right.
I've also found magnesium can play a role in high blood pressure because it relaxes the heart at rest, because we want to keep the diastolic reading down. And also, magnesium can play a role in restless legs, in cramping, but then at the same time I investigate, well, why are you low in magnesium? Is it because you're drinking too much coffee? Is it because you're not taking enough of the Celtic and the Baja salt? They both have 3 magnesium. So yes, magnesium can play a role, but let's first of all investigate as to why you are low.
I think it's because of you. My wife bought the Celtic salt, and she said, take a little bit under the tongue. And so what are some of the benefits of that?
Well, some of the benefits are that the Celtic salt is a hand-harvested sea salt. Mm-hmm. France has declared 4 million acres heritage on the Brittany coast, so they see the value of this pristine area for hand-harvested sea salt. Now, these big salt flats are on peninsulas, so with the wind gushing across, the water evaporates very quickly, and they hand-harvest it, so there's a lot of minerals locked up in those crystals, even in parts per million iodine. So when you put that crystal of Celtic salt on your tongue and you crunch it, just picture the mineral gases exploding in your mouth. Wow. You don't need much iodine, but you just do that every time you have a glass of water, then you're maintaining the mineral balance in your body.
Well, iodine is very important, obviously for thyroid function, and they iodize the salt.
Well, unfortunately, and Dr. David Brownstein in his book Iodine, Why You Need It and Why You Can't Live Without It, considered an expert on thyroid and iodine, he said when you open the iodized salt, within an hour it's evaporated. And when the waves crash in the sea, the iodine goes into suspension, goes and lands on the land. So the vegetables and fruits grown on the coastal areas, they do have some iodine in them.
I love it. Okay, one thing I saw on your website, wild yam cream, and I saw you've got a section in your book on that.
That's right. So the wild yam contains a plant chemical called diosgenin. And when it's applied to the skin, particularly the skin, Dr. John Lee, who's probably the first doctor that blew the whistle on the hormonal imbalance, he shows that if you eat the yam, your liver detoxifies it. You'll get 400% more when you apply it to the skin. The fat cells take it up and it stimulates the biochemical pathway in your body that your body uses to make progesterone. I call progesterone mother because when progesterone is instated in her rightful position, she keeps the son, testosterone, and the daughters, the estrogens, in their correct balance. And I find so many people today have a major or a minor hormonal imbalance. And there's many environmental poisons we are exposed to. Probably the most guilty is the contraceptive pill that are causing this hormonal imbalance. So the wild yam cream is helping many people.
So you recommend it, because that was on my list of things I really want to get your opinion on. So you recommend it for men and women? That's
right, because mother hormone is mother to the sons and the daughters.
So a lot of men, and this is in the mainstream media, even Joe Rogan, the Meeks, or Means, I think, they talk a lot about all the plastics that are now all over, and they're in our brains, and I think they did a study there in testicles on men. I mean, so plastics are getting everywhere, and they're reducing men's testosterone. So TRT, some of these are becoming really popular. So what's your opinion on those, and what's the best natural way of doing it?
Well, the best natural way is to apply the wild yam cream. Mm-hmm. I'm alarmed at the amount of polyester I see in homes. It's, just the fact that it was created in a chemical laboratory, I'm not interested in it. And these chemical fabrics, the chemicals found in, cleaning products, personal care products, our foods, they are all contributing, like the dripping tap on a stone, to the imbalance in the hormones. See, when I was a little girl, if a plastic bottle was out on the yard, it would crack and go brittle. They don't do that today because they have bisphenol A or nonylphenol in them. Now, in the molecular structure of estrogen, it has a phenyl ring, PHENOL. And that phenyl ring is the key that unlocks the door into the receptor side.
I see.
And these plastics have that phenyl ring.
Mm-hmm.
And so the plastics are disrupting the hormones.
And I was thinking about this. I mean, the pipes in this house, they're PEX, plastic tubing, so many of our clothes, underwear, you mentioned bras for women, fabrics. I mean, It's everywhere. Even the water bottle, you get handed a water bottle.
It's everywhere. Regarding the plastic pipes, what I do is I run the water for 5 minutes. So I'm not drinking the water that's sat in the pipes. That's a good little
a pro tip.
A good little tip because, we've got plastic pipes. It's just
everywhere. I mean, you can't avoid it.
It's just the easier. But there is a type of plastic that does not have the phenols, or you call them the phenols, probably my accent.
No, it's okay. You're Australian.
And that's BPA-free plastic.
Yes.
So the plastic bottle I cart everywhere with me is a BPA-free.
Yeah.
So again, it hasn't got the phenol in it.
Been trying to do the metal. I don't know if they have bad stuff on the metal ones. Is that any better?
No, it's pretty good.
Glass.
Yeah.
Teas for health. We've recently gotten more into teas. My wife put a little tea, hot water dispenser in our bedroom, so we've been doing teas every morning. Are there particular teas that you recommend for health benefits?
Well, my favourite is the ginger tea.
Okay. And we have a lemon ginger one.
Yeah, the ginger's great internally. It's not as strong as the turmeric, but it's fairly good on inflammation. It's the anti-nausea herb. It also can give a little boost to your hydrochloric acid, so the ginger's very nice. Peppermint's great for calming the stomach, as is ginger, and peppermint's also good if someone has a headache. So the herbal teas are a lot milder. I was just talking to Ricky, our book guy, and he's coming off tea. He's an Englishman.
Right.
And I said, try the rooibos. So the rooibos is it's called a red leaf African tea.
Okay.
And if I taste rooibos, I do not like it because I think it tastes like black tea.
Oh, yes. I don't like that taste either.
No, but for people coming off black tea, the rooibos is a great alternative because it has no caffeine.
Yeah, we use only herbal teas, no caffeine teas. What about, there's like some mushroom type teas? What your opinion?
No, I'm not very familiar. I mostly drink water. Maybe I'll have a hot ginger tea if I'm cold or want something a little different. But I do know that a lot of people love that hot cup of coffee. So they're looking at an alternative.
I see.
And you can get dandelion, roasted dandelion, or tibucina. I think there's one, yeah. There's a few alternatives.
I love it. Those are great. Okay, castor oil. My dad also has, I think he feels like that's one of those remedies for everything, but I noticed you have a lot in your book and on your website.
Yeah, we do. I have a book in my library at home. It's called The Oil That Heals, and it was written by a doctor who's used castor oil in his practice for many years. He quotes a psychic, which I'm really not into. I have belief in God, and God, of course, made the castor oil. But we find that, in fact, I had a lady just contacting me recently, and for 2 months she put castor oil in her eye, and she went to have her cataract operation, and the doctor said, you don't need to be operated on, it's gone.
Wow. Okay.
Now, obviously, if the cataract's been there a while, it might take a little longer. But we've seen people break up bone spurs. And a funny story, I was in Dublin airport waiting for my pickup, and a man came up and he said, are you Barbara O'Neill? I said, I am. He said, I've got a story for you. He said, and he looked late 50s, all his ligaments in his hand were shrinking, and his hand was coming like a claw. And he heard about the castor oil, so he wore castor oil pack on his hand every night. For a month, he said, look, it's gone. He said, I just want to thank you.
Interesting. So amazing properties to that. We talked about cayenne pepper and turmeric, curcumin. We already touched on this Celtic salt. Okay, one more. This seems like it's the most popular thing in Hollywood. It's the easiest way to lose weight is you get this, the GLP-1 inhibitors and semaglutide. What is your opinion on these? It seems like such an attractive way of losing
It
weight.
seems like such an attractive way, but I might introduce you to the poem called Choose Your Hard.
Mm-hmm.
Marriage is hard, divorce is hard, choose your hard. Being obese is hard, keeping fit is hard, choose your hard. And it's the same with weight loss. Now that might seem like a quick fix, but it's a little bit buy now, pay later.
Mm-hmm.
It causes major gut disruptions.
Okay.
So if I was that person, I would not touch it. And in my book, Sustain Me, there are some simple weight loss tips. One is eating breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, and supper like a pauper.
This book here, the Sustain Me.
That's
So
right.
this is your latest book.
Yes.
And
The chapter's called Weighing Up Weight Loss. And also balancing the hormones. Many ladies are carrying excess weight because of a hormonal imbalance.
mm-hmm.
So estrogen, which is the hormone that gets that rises and displaces the mother hormone, it's a cell proliferator. So if a lady has this hormonal imbalance, and a guy too, with too much estrogen, it's almost impossible to lose weight. So once again, a person could take this drug and it will probably cause weight loss. But then what happens is when they go off it, the weight can just pack right on because they've never addressed the fact that they've quite possibly got a hormonal imbalance.
Very interesting. And I've heard that it can also reduce your muscles. So I've heard some,
That's right.
Peter Attia, I think, mentions this, that unless your BMI is over 50,
Yeah.
then you really shouldn't be on
Yeah, it's not a good look.
okay.
That's why my comment is this is a buy now, pay later, and the payment is not good.
It's not worth it. So
It's not.
let's talk now. I want to talk about weight loss a little bit, but also on the carnivore diet seems to be really a popular thing these days. What's your opinion on the carnivore diet?
I believe the carnivore diet has become popular, and because of this high carbohydrate diet that so many people are eating. And in his book, Dr. William Davis, in his book Wheat Belly, he just about uses that term on every page because he shows that the hybridization of the wheat changed the starch structure and it gets the blood sugar level up very high, and the body reacts by pulling it out and dumping it as a visceral fat on the belly. And so stopping all wheat, even drastically reducing all carbohydrates, is a great way to lose weight. So
I love it.
change in weight.
And that's where I know you're a fan of kind of the a version of the keto diet where you're really limiting your carbs and certainly getting rid of all the processed carbs.
That's right. You can actually do a diet similar to keto on a plant-based diet. And I believe your original question on the carnivore, it's a reaction in a way. So they've gone over to the other extreme and they're feeling great, they're losing weight. Well, no wonder, they've stopped the carbohydrates. But the fact is, and Dr. Will Bilserwick, there's a Will and a Bill in there in his name, he shows that all plant foods, they all feed the great microorganisms in the gut, but the meat does not. The meat does not feed the healthy microorganisms. Meat does not have fibre, and we need that fibre to keep things moving in that gastrointestinal tract. It's an extreme diet, and initially people may benefit purely because their body's so happy to be off those carbohydrates and start getting some good proteins. But I'd also like to suggest it's difficult to buy good meat today. I'm a plant-based diet. I'm really not even interested in eating organic meat. I love plants. But I do understand that a lot of people, they like their meat, and if you want meat, you really have to go organic. And one lady said, well, if I'm going organic, it's not going to be a lot of part of our diet.
It's true. And out here, a lot of people like hunting, and so that's
Yeah.
probably a healthier, at least you're getting a healthy
It
animal.
possibly is, but you've got another aspect. Dogs' gastrointestinal tracts are 1 yard long, ours are 10 yard long. And when plants break down, they ferment. When animal breaks down, it putrefies. And those putrefaction fumes are quite toxic. So you've got that aspect too. So if someone does want to eat meat, they really should pack it out with a lot of vegetables. They might feel good originally on the carnivore diet, but often arthritis starts to appear because of the inflammation caused by the high acid diet. So, yeah, it's looking at the end results of all of that.
And this book is now a little bit old, but the China study actually shows how they can turn cancer on and off by
That's
increasing.
true. That's a very interesting book. He found that he could turn cancer cells on and off by the amount of meat and dairy products he was giving the rats in his experiment. The reason why the book's called the China study is because a Chinese emperor got cancer and he wanted a survey done of the whole of China. Mm-hmm. And what they found that the cancer rates in the city were far higher, even twice as high as in the country. And the difference was the diet. You see, the country people can't afford the refined food, the sugars, the meats. So they're eating more plants, maybe a little soy, maybe a little fish, whereas the city Chinese were eating what Time magazine called the meat sweet diet, which is high meat, high dairy, high refined grains, and high sugar.
I love it. And one of the things that I love that you do is you actually break it down to 3 food groups, which is really protein and fiber, because most people say carbohydrates, but you say fiber, protein, fiber, and fats. And I love it that you're not afraid of fats, because most people are super, on this super lean.
Well, they are. I was reading of one nutritionist, and he said, I think it's going to take a whole generation to get out of the fat phobia. We hope as Lucas is 15, in his generation, they're not afraid of fat. I think in your generation, starting to see it, my generation, they're still a little bit under the misconception that fat causes heart disease. And in my book, Sustain Me, I have a chapter on the heart. I call it Love Your Heart with All Your Heart. And I quote all the books in there from the many different authors. In fact, most of them not orthopedic, cardiovascular surgeons who were saying it's a con, it's a lie, fat does not cause heart disease. And they're the guys that have got the scalpels that are doing the bypasses.
And they're seeing it. And in your lectures, you very nicely show how, treating the cholesterol is like getting rid of fire trucks in order to get rid of fires, because if every time you see a fire there's a fire truck, well, let's just get rid of fire trucks and there won't be any more fires. So you're actually treating the person trying to help rather than the underlying cause.
Because the fact is that so many are on these cholesterol-lowering medications, but heart disease is still the number 1 killer. But what's really risen is Alzheimer's.
Yes, and you're right, because the brain is 70% fat. You've mentioned that.
Yeah.
The intermittent fasting. Now, I've been skipping breakfast because it's the easiest meal to skip, and I know it's probably not the meal that I should skip. I should skip dinner, but it's so hard because I get so hungry at night. So, any pointers on which meal to skip? And
my son James, but mostly my son Peter, and they're both very well built, and they're both tradesmen, though they have their own businesses, so they're a lot in the office. They skip breakfast, and they like having a big lunch and then dinner with the family. But I have found, as Peter's wife said to me, she said, I tried it, and she's very slim like me. She said, by 10 o'clock I'm fading. And she said, and I have the big meal at night and I can't sleep because there's so much food in my stomach. And I first heard about it in the writings of Ellen White, where she said we should, and it's the old adage, breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, and supper like a pauper.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I say? Whatever works. It works well for Peter, but it doesn't work well for a runner. It doesn't work well for me. In fact, I had a good breakfast yesterday and a great lunch, and I didn't eat again till the morning. And I have to tell you that by 7, I'm saying to Jacqueline, where's breakfast? Let's get the food on the table. So when you do eat dinner, you're not as interested in breakfast.
Well, and that's true because people say they're not hungry for breakfast, and I always say skip dinner, and you'll see how hungry you are for breakfast. And I know at night your body's the morning meal is called break fast.
That's
so at
true.
night your hormones are preparing for sleep, and so they're hanging on to those calories. So a calorie eaten at night is not the same as a calorie eaten in the morning.
It's absolutely true, and we've had phenomenal weight loss of people coming to our retreat. Not a great amount, of course, in a week, but 6 weeks later, they say 10 kilo. That's about 20 pound lost, and they say it's like we're not even on a diet because we're eating so well, but we're eating most of our food, breakfast and lunch. Now, some retired couples, they'll have breakfast at 9 and the main meal at 3.
And that's what I usually encourage people.
Then it's easy not to eat at night.
When I retire, I will switch to that. Exercise. What are your favorite exercises? What's the best way? I know you like the high intensity interval training and the rebounder. I absolutely love the rebounder. I've done a bunch of research on it because my mother had one. I was like, so then I started doing research on it, and it's phenomenal. So I'd love to hear your opinions.
Yes, I love, excuse me, my ribs don't like me. We can cut that, can't we? So, rebounder. Was very interesting how I discovered this. I was in the doctor's office in Eden Valley Retreat waiting for a guest who was taking a while to come, and I looked down and saw a book called Rebounding for Life by Albert Carter.
Okay.
It was written in the 80s. I couldn't put that book down. I took it home to my room and I read the whole book in the week. And what I love about he was a trampolinist, and he was incredibly fit. His kids were phenomenally fit because they had a trampoline show. His little girl, she's 4 and she could do one-arm push-ups. His little boy would challenge other boys at school because he was little, he got picked on, to 1,000 push-ups. No one could keep up to him. So
Wow.
he went on an investigation to find out why is it such a powerful form of exercise. And in the 80s, the only place he found that was talking about it was NASA. You see, the astronauts, when they came back from 2 weeks in outer space, they'd often lost 25% bone strength and muscle strength. And so they were looking for a form of exercise that helped them to maintain their strength so they didn't lose so much when they came back, and also, return it quickly. And the only thing was trampolining.
I love it. So,
Isn't that
and it's so much
incredible?
fun. I personally just love jumping.
It is.
And
It's such fun. And if there's a trampoline in your home, where are the kids?
on the trampoline.
And I came to the conclusion we get old because we stop jumping.
I love that conclusion, but it helps with vestibular, with your coordination. It's supposed to build muscles, even pelvic floor issues as women get older that have had kids.
That's
so
true.
it can help with all those
That's
things,
true.
and it's just a fun, easy thing.
And you can even strengthen your biceps and triceps by having your
Putting your
arms
arms out.
out and turning the palm up for triceps. And he also shows, apparently he's got a book on this, I don't have it, on eyesight, how it can strengthen eyesight. So when you're jumping, so what I do at home when I'm trampolining, I'll focus on maybe the door frame for 10 jumps, and then the next 10 jumps, I focus on maybe the guttering. And while I'm focusing on the guttering, the door frame's jumping in my peripheral. And then I'll go back and at
You can
home, I'll target on the cow, target on the pine trees.
So you're changing focal
You're
length.
changing focus.
I love it. Well, and you don't realize how incredible your brain and eye muscles are until, if you take an old video camera and you run with it, you see what it, how shaky it is. Yet our
That is
brain,
true.
when we run, have this incredible steady camera.
That's right. That's right. And that's what what William Bates says in his book, Better Eyesight Without Glasses. We should spend more time gazing at the hills, the mountains. It's easy here because the mountains are covered in snow, which is very exciting for an Australian. But too much time, short range.
I agree. And I know when I was in medical school, I would try to always look up, focus close.
That's good.
Even I confess in this, when I'd be in church, I'd look at the person's hair in front of me and so close, far, trying to get that eye exercise.
But you know, Sorin, that's an excellent illustration of no matter where you are, you can be doing those short, long range. What William Bates shows that our eyes are connected to our brain. And he shows that eye strain in the morning strengthens your eyesight because your brain's fresh. Eye strain at night weakens your eyes because your brain's tired. So he shows the link between eye and brain.
That's right. So I'm very interested in that. I absolutely hate these things. And so anything I can do to use them less, I'm excited to do. And I bought that book. I'm going to read it.
Yeah, it's a good illustration. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Yes. Addiction and habits, and there's many addictions, even sugar probably being one of the most common ones.
I'll tell you, some of the most commons are wheat, wheat addiction, because as Dr. William Davis shows in his book, gets the blood sugar level up really high, even higher than sugar. So you look at people trying to give up bread, they almost, they're suffering.
You know, I'm going to blame it on you.
Yeah.
About 8 years ago or something, you did these videos for Amazing Discovery, and you talked about that. And as a Romanian that loves bread, that was so.
It's tough. It's tough. But I have to tell you, I love bread.
Okay.
But not all bread.
Ancient grains.
I like a very good quality bread, and that's what I loved about Germany. Even in a average hotel, you get beautiful bread.
So, but is it the ancient grains? Is that what they're called?
Sometimes. I don't have any health problems. I can handle a little wheat now and then. I don't eat much, and I'm sure if I ate it 3 times a day, I'd start to have some sort of health problems.
Well,
but that's why in my book, Sustain Me, the M stands for moderation. So I eat wheat in moderation, but if I had any health problem, I wouldn't touch it.
You would skip it. Any other suggestions you have for people struggling with addictions?
Yeah, addiction's a big thing, and we find the best way to stop addictions, whether it be wheat, whether it be sugar, whether it be caffeine, and I have to tell you, people suffer more from caffeine withdrawals than any other withdrawal, and we've had people come off methamphetamines, heroin, alcohol, cigarettes. No one suffers like the coffee drinker.
Right.
And that's how I know this isn't as safe as most people say. In fact, I say if someone wanted to conquer New York, just stop the caffeine. The nation would be crippled. And I don't want to be dependent on something like that.
100%.
And so what can you do to get off them? Well, at our retreat, and I know there are 2 retreats in America that run our program. One is Living Springs in Roanoke, Alabama, and the other one is Eden Valley Retreat that's in Loveland, Colorado. And the reason they run our retreat is they asked me many years ago, maybe 10 years ago, to come and run a program, and they were amazed at the results. You see, we've been running this program for 25 years in Australia, and the results are great, so we just do it. And we find that 2 days on juice fasting. And when they do the juice fasting, we serve mostly 80% carrot, 10% apple, 10% celery. It's called the vegetarian's milk. And adjustments on that, sometimes a bit less carrot, a bit more beetroot, sometimes a little bit more cucumber, but variations on the theme.
Carrot is your 80%.
Yeah. In one of the juices, sometimes a little less. We serve 5 a day.
Wow.
Because the liver needs nutrients to detoxify us from environmental poisons. And because we as a people are so exposed to environmental poisons today, we need those nutrients while we're fasting. And we find that people cruise through these fasts. But we also find that the fast done in combination of drinking a glass of water between every juice, and also the steam sauna at the end of the day, which stimulates perspiration. And I was reading in one hydrotherapy book that when you give the body the right conditions, meaning it's well hydrated and you're in the steam sauna, perspiring profusely, 70% of body's waste can come out of the skin.
That's right.
That's incredible.
Yes, and I tell people, really, feces, urine, and sweat are your body's only way of getting rid of toxins.
That's right. They're your body's garbage disposal units. You call them trash disposal units. Do you know that we find that that's a very effective way to get off addictions?
Sweating
In fact,
it out?
The juicing,
Oh,
the
juicing.
fasting,
Okay.
the sweating, the exercise, the hydration. So we say to our guests, what we do to you in a week would take about 6 months on a good diet.
And what do you think of the infrared saunas? I'm just curious.
Do you know, I think the infrared saunas can play a role. I think they're good, but personally I love that steam, because we are 85% water from the head up, 75% water from the neck down.
Right. And a lot of the Nordic countries, Sweden, they love their hot steam, and then they jump in a cold.
And they roll. Yeah, we say to our guests, we're not asking you to roll in the snow, just to dive in this in this creek. That is a powerful way to detox. And I guess the beauty of going to a health retreat is you're being watched, everyone else is doing it. You can do it at home. It's a bit hard when the rest of your family's eating.
I love it. Okay, environmental toxins, and here I've got a number of things. So radiation from cell phones, Wi-Fi, any opinions on that?
Do you know there are ways that you can protect yourself? And my last phone, I had a safe sleeve on it. And I know my husband kept saying to me, as if that would work. But one day I unpacked my bag after flying and there was a pair of scissors in my bag. And I thought, why didn't the X-ray pick up the scissors? And I noticed it was lying against my phone. And so the next time I flew, I got a little pair of scissors that I didn't mind losing, and I nestled it next to my phone. It went through the X-ray, didn't pick it up. And that proved to me that it actually does work.
Very interesting.
That it does work. So there are ways to protect. I wear a little pendant when I go through the X-ray that's got quartz and a copper thread through it. I don't know, but I am told that protects somewhat. But I think the main thing is sleep in an electromagnetic free zone.
Okay.
Have your phone out, and if you are on call, please have your phone in the hallway. You'll wake up.
So.
And on your body, I was reading of a breast surgeon. He said it's alarming the amount of young women that are coming in with breast cancer in the breast where they have their phone in their bra. And you can even buy a sports bra now with a pocket in it.
Yes, and I've seen that, and I warn women because I tell them this little device can travel. There's enough energy travel 5 miles.
It's called the silent killer. And I've also had a young man with prostate cancer who used to drive his little sports car with his laptop on his lap. So I say to people, the worst place for your laptop is on your lap. Protect the family jewels.
I totally
Women
agree.
and men. And
Yes.
I wonder how many hip replacements are going to happen because the phone was in the hip pocket, not for one day or 1 year, but for 20 years.
20 years. And that's what I think the data is showing, because even putting your cell phone up to your head, especially for kids, because their skulls are thinner.
Yes, that's true.
So I always recommend on speakerphone. So plastics, that's another hot topic.
It is. In fact, I've had people say, we hear that there's microplastics in Celtic salt. I said there's more microplastics in the air than in that salt.
Oh.
And I know there are some salt producers that are trying to give a bad name to these hand-harvested sea salts.
But in general, I think you recommend is organic clothing. You mentioned
right.
bamboo clothing.
That's right. So let me go through my little woolen coat that I got from Scotland and my silk scarf that my friend gave me from Dubai, and this little top that I've got on is 80% modal, and modal is the cellulose spun from the birch tree.
Oh, wow.
And it's got a little cashmere. I've got my woolen skirt on, and my stockings are bamboo and wool. So if you investigate, you will find it. And I know Boody, Boody, that has a lot of underwear clothing for women, and it's...
And for men, I noticed. I went to that website after you
good, you got
mentioned
it too. So for viscose, which is bamboo. Now, it is true that when they're softening the fabric, they soften it with chemicals, but all you have to do is wash it and put it on the clothesline for the day in the sun, and it will detoxify. Same with cotton. It's the most sprayed crop. You've got to wash your cotton and put it in the clothesline. I think that the clothesline people should have me on their payroll because I'm pushing all Americans to get clotheslines.
You know, in Europe, you see it between the buildings. Everybody hangs. You can see all your neighbors' underwear. I guess in Italy and places like that.
Well, I was in Pennsylvania last week and I was very excited to see clotheslines. And they said it's the Amish.
I love it. I love it. Talk about the role that... One of the things I think in Western medicine, we're very good at like finding a drug that blocks this specific enzyme and this pathway. But I think one of the big things we miss in Western medicine is kind of the mind-body connection. And even you're open talking about your belief in God. How do you think that plays a role in healing?
Do you know it plays a huge role? And some claim that all disease is in the mind. I don't believe that. Mm-hmm. But in some cases it is. Mm-hmm. And if there's anything I've learnt in my many years on this planet, it's never to be absolute. You can't put everyone in the same box. But I have to tell you, with some people, the mind plays a huge role. Mm-hmm. But with some people, a minor role. Mm-hmm. But the mind does play a big role in the health of the body. It's as simple as this. If you say it's good, it will be. If you say it's bad, it will be. And that gets back to that proverb 7:23, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Those thoughts affect our body, and we have more say over what we think than we think we do. And that's why I love this subject, because I worked as a psychiatric nurse for many years, mm-hmm. and I didn't see people get better. I just saw them managed. And what were they managed with? Medication. Mm-hmm. But in my travels, I've met 5 people who were diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar. They're medication-free and managing. Now, as a psych nurse, I didn't think that was possible.
Yeah.
It's hard work. It's hard being on medication. It's hard getting off it and managing it, but that's why, again, we choose our hard. So the connection between the mind and the body is great. It's huge. And that's why one of the laws of health, in fact, right in the middle, the T in Sustain Me, is trust in divine power, trust in God. Because when we trust in God, we give our worries to Him. And that's what I do. I try not to worry about anything because I see that as a lack of faith. I might look around me, things might look concerning, but you know what? I know there's a higher power there. And as one speaker in Australia said to me, we're under orders from above. I said, I totally agree. And it was the first night here I was told there was a lady with a handgun in the front row. And a couple of people were concerned about that. They said, are you concerned? I said, not at all. I said, if my time is up, my time is up. Mm-hmm. But if my time is not up, I know that, and God has a plan for me. You see, these angels that excel in strength are mighty. And then would say, but Barbara, you had a crash the other night. Look at you. I said, yeah, but I'm not dead. And when you're in the front line of the battle, sometimes you get wounded.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love seeing in that faith so many people, it's pulled them through these tough situations. Some people just break down and give up, but others you see when you have that faith that can give you the strength.
That's true. When you have that faith, and I love what it says in 2 Corinthians in verse 4, it's starting at chapter 4, it starts at verse 6. It says, "For God, who commanded the light to shine forth in darkness, has shined in our hearts, to give us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ." Now we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of the power may be of God and not of ourselves. We are troubled on every side, but not distressed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Cast down, but not destroyed. Ever bearing about in the body the dying of our Lord Jesus Christ, that the life also of him might be made manifest in our body. I love that little selection of verses, because it shows it doesn't mean we're going to be in a bed of roses. It doesn't mean we're not going to crash sometimes and have some cracked ribs. Cast down, but not destroyed. I love it.
I love it. That's really, really encouraging. Now, two more topics, if you will. So one, I want to talk about, if you Google Barbara O'Neill, and I even typed it into one of the AI programs, and there's a lot of what I call haters out there. You were banned in Australia. You've got this...
And Zorin, and you're still willing to interview me?
You are phenomenal. Well, the part that people are interested means they're not buying it. Like people, and even now, like I think trust in the CDC after, the data is coming out of COVID, and we see that some of our top health officials literally lied or made up information. So, and I know there's a book about the assassination. You're not dead, but they tried to take you out, take your influence out.
Yes, they did. And my husband was so alarmed at what they did to me, because after the tribunal, I call it the Inquisition, for a couple of hours, I went to the bathroom, and Michael was just talking to our lawyer. And the lawyer said, "I can't believe it. They've got nothing on her." Now, this lawyer sits through these all the time. And she was puzzled. She said, "They've got nothing on you." Michael said, "Does that mean she'll get off?" And the lawyer said, "No, she'll get a life ban, but she won't go to jail. Because if she was guilty, she'd go to jail." So that's an important thing to remember. If I was guilty, I would go to jail. And the reason why they couldn't find anything on me, because I don't claim anything. I don't claim to be able to heal anyone. I cannot heal anyone. I'm just a teacher. And I love teaching people how to look after their bodies and give their bodies the right conditions. So my husband wanted to take it to court, but he met a Romanian pastor who had escaped communism, had to go through becoming a doctor all over again, and he was only working for about 10 years, and the CDC, not the CDC,
FDA
the Complaints Commission. They got reports that this doctor was not writing enough scripts. So they investigated him, and they asked some of his patients, and they said, "Oh, this is a great doctor. If we get a cold, he gets us to have orange juice and vitamin C." And that was enough. They put him under investigation, and they banned him. So he lost all his qualifications, so he took it to the High Court. And he lost. He said, "I've lost everything. I've lost my qualifications. I've lost my house." He said to Michael, "Don't take it to court." Because my husband's a fighter. So my husband went home and wrote that book.
Oh, I see. Really fascinating.
He was so frustrated at the injustice of it. And when I got the ban in July 2019, he said, "You have a choice now. You can retire, your retirement age, or you can go overseas." I said, "I'll go overseas." I said, "I've never had so much information. I have never had so much experience, and I feel great. I feel no different than I felt in my 40s, maybe not quite now with my broken rib and after my crash. But even then, I'm feeling fine, and I think I feel fine because everything I do keeps my body working well." And so 2020, he had me totally booked out, but then the world shut down. So 2021, up to, we're just near the end of 2024, I've been away from home for 9 months. So I lecture a different place every week. And people say, "How do you manage?" I said, "I found a formula. It's called the Sustain Me Principles, and they sustain me."
I love it. So let's let's talk a little bit about how people can connect. Do you want to talk a little bit about your books? I know they say this is Barbara O'Neill in your back pocket. This book, Sustain Me.
Yeah, the Sustain Me principles, the S, and they're all illustrated here. It's sunshine, use of water, sleep, trust in God, abstain, inhale through your nose. Nutrition, moderation, and exercise. So we've put the laws of health into an acronym. And what I did in the book, I started at the head and I go down. I look at the eyes, I look at the ears, I look at the respiratory, the chest, I looked at the stomach. And I, I go down the whole body. And so it really is a handbook on natural remedies. So I wanted to create a book that people could have in their home, and if they get an ache or a pain or a cough or a cold, they can look up. Whereas this book here,
and I just want to comment on that book too, BarbaraO'Neill.com, because you've mentioned there's been some issues with some of the major online sellers where they shipped a lot of books and they lost them, and so you just now focus on selling it through your website, BarbaraO'Neill.com.
you can get it on Amazon.
Okay.
There was a scam one on Amazon. My book is $50, and the scam was all black and white and was $70 because a lady brought it to me to sign. I said, this isn't my book. Where did you get it? And that's when we discovered that Amazon thought they were the real and we were the fake. So then we had to come up with a copyright. And so now all that's been settled.
But
and
I know your website, Barbara O'Neill's kind of...
BarbaraO'Neill.com. You can certainly order it from there. That's right. So beware of fake ones. And Self-Heal by Design, I wrote this book, I think 2010, and I wanted to write a book. You see, the second title is the true role of microorganisms in disease. I wanted to show that we don't need to fear the germs. So this is actually a really good book for the COVID crisis we've just been through, because it proves we don't need to be scared of a virus. So the germs don't cause disease, they're the result of unhealthful conditions, and I think people are starting to see that. But I go a little bit further in this book and show how a person can conquer cancer. So looking at conquering yeast, problems in the body, the true role of microorganisms and how to conquer cancer. This actually looks at the true cause of disease, and I also touch on genetics as well. Do they play a role? Whereas this one here is like the handbook, the handbook on natural remedies.
Wonderful. And then what are your websites where people... I know people always want to get in touch with you, so BarbaraO'Neill.com.
Well,
you also sell a lot of different products that you support.
BarbaraO'Neill.com will take you to my daughter's, that's like her website, and she sells the book. She also sells some of the herbal mixes that you'll find in these books. She also makes her own comfrey cream, a few things like that, salves. And it'll also take you to another website, which is Self-Heal by Design. And in Self-Heal by Design, you can download my lectures. I think there's a 13-part series. And my husband and I, Michael, recently did a parenting series.
Oh, wonderful.
And it's 6-part, and that you can also download on Self-Heal by Design.
And you've got, you've got a little bit of experience having raised 8 children. And you have some in your talk last night where you talked about a lot about parenting. So I know you had some wonderful suggestions. My wife and I were talking about them last night.
That's right. That's right. Trying to make it easy.
Yes.
In fact, I think it's called Parenting in the Modern Age.
Parenting in the Modern.
And Michael will talk for 10, 15 minutes, then I talk. So he gives the man's view and I give the lady's views, because we've both been single parents. We've both, and of course we united our families, so we're very familiar with united families. We are now grandparents, so we feel that we have the experience to be able to give meetings like that. We've been asked so many times, because my husband is a storyteller, and so he often tells stories, and people say, you've got to write a book, you've got to give a series. So that's what we have done there.
And then tell me about the retreats that you do. You mentioned 2 retreats in America, and
Yeah.
there's yours in Australia.
Unfortunately, because of my very busy schedule, I am unable to run the retreats anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But, the people do not need me because it's the principals.
Mm-hmm.
And in Living Springs, they've got a fantastic team. And in Eden Valley, they've got a fantastic team. And our retreat in Australia is still running. It's very, very busy. I think it's booked out 4 months ahead. And we average 16 to 18 guests every week. That's 3 weeks a
And
month.
what was that one called?
Misty Mountain Health Retreat.
Okay.
And
So-
I think in the back of both of these books there's an ad for Misty Mountain.
Well, Barbara, thank you so much for your time. I'm just excited to see how hungry the world is to hear from Barbara O'Neill, and how your principles have really changed so many lives, and how you give glory to God for this, because you said you don't heal people, you educate people on how the body can heal itself.
That's true. And I came across a wonderful little psalm only about a year ago. It's Psalm 146, verse 3. It says, "Put not your trust in princes, neither in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help. His breath goes forth, he returns unto his earth. In that very day his thoughts perish." And verse 5 says, "Happy is he that hath the God of Jacob as his help, whose hope is in the Lord his God, that made heaven, earth, sea, and all that in them is, that keeps truth forever." But down in verse 9 it says that the ways of the wicked God can turn upside down. So the very act of banning me in Australia has actually caused me to explode worldwide in ways that I never dreamt about. And in Australia, by the way, everyone in Australia is getting more of my information than even when I was there lecturing. So, God oversees, God is overall. And when I look at that, and I think most people can testify when they look back on their life, that God is worthy to be trusted, he's worthy to be praised, and having faith in him does a lot for our health.
Thank you again so much, Barbara. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.